All
So
right.
live streamed. Is that
We are
Looks like
being
it's good.
we are being live streamed. So good afternoon, everyone. So we're actually recording this in the morning, but good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to Living in the Texas Hill Country. This is season 2, episode 16.
16.
16. And this I'm excited about this one because I feel like this is one that this is like it's not necessarily, I'll say, seasonally appropriate, but timing wise, this is a very appropriate topic because this is something that you can prep yourself for later on. But we are going to be talking about preparing a soil for seeding, and we have Dr. Larry Redmond with us this afternoon. So we're very honored. Dr. Redmond is a very, very busy man. So we're very, very honored that he decided to take the time to join us today. But I guess, Dr. Redmond, you want to just give us a little rundown of what you do on the daily basis?
Ah, well, I have a lot of titles. I don't know really what I do anymore.
Pick your favorite title today, I guess. You can pick
I
your
guess
favorite
my
title today.
favorite title today, I guess I'm the Associate Department Head in Soil and Crop Sciences and Extension Program Leader. So I have about 30 faculty that work for me across the state of Texas. And if there's something that grows out of the ground, we touch it. I mean, and not horticulture crop. We don't do potatoes and strawberry, but any other crop, forages, turf in your lawn, whatever. Also serves the state forage specialist for extension. And so in that role, I continue to support county extension programs when they need somebody to come and speak about, forage selection management, production, those kinds of things. I'm also a certified wildlife biologist, which gives me
Fun fact.
gives me kind of an input into some of the things that people do in South Texas and out in the Edwards Plateau, Hill Country area, because that's really kind of my passion, is that aspect. But anyway, so they call me an agronomist, and so I'm going to try to serve as an agronomist today, and I hope after it's over with, Liz, you still feel honored to have had me here. So we'll see. So go ahead. And
I was going to say, so I guess we'll start off with, so for people that don't know, what is an agronomist? Like, what is that? What does that mean?
so that's a person that studies plant and soil science. We actually used to be called the agronomy department before we changed our name to soil and crop sciences. And I still prefer agronomy. It's a kind of a retro title, but anyway, that's what we do. We have a lot of soil scientists in our department. And at one time I thought I wanted to be a soil scientist, but then I decided I wanted to be a forage person. And so that's where we are now.
I was gonna say, I mean, and really at the end of the day, they're completely different, but they're very connected because you can't get your plants without your soil. And in order to keep your soil in place, you need your plants. So they're very, very much interconnected.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
exactly. We like to refer to as the soil plant animal interface. And so when you're thinking about that, because the animal also has a lot of influence on what's going on the landscape. So
yes, sometimes it's kind of one of those things where in wildlife we have this phrase where it's like wildlife management is habitat management, because if they don't have their food, if they don't have their shelter, which is what the plants provide, it's very much a yeah, very, very interconnected. And sometimes it's hard to I hate to say parse things out, but you kind of, it's hard to like sometimes draw those lines of, you're like, well, if you want really good information, you should probably reach out to a range or an agronomist, because that's kind of out of my wheelhouse a little bit. But I guess so, yeah. So we're going to talk about prepping soil for seeds. So I guess let's start off with like, when is like the best, I guess we'll start, what is like step one in regards to prepping seeds for soil, or my goodness, prepping your soil for the seeds, not the other way around.
so let's take a step back. from that just for a bit and think about what is it we're trying to establish. Because, it depends on, is it a cool season annual? We're going into that time of the year that we're going to be thinking about planting, and that's going to come pretty quickly because anything cool season starts 6 to 8 weeks before the first historic frost date. So whatever that date would be in Uvalde, it'd be different than in Johnson City, obviously. But whatever that historic first frost date is, back up 6 to 8 weeks, and that would be the time that we would think about planting a cool season annual. And so that's on a lot of people's minds. A lot of people out there will plant oat later this fall or late summer, either for cattle, livestock, or for deer. It seems like most of the oat is planted for deer out there. And there's a good reason, because oat is very well adapted to that country. And so when we think about we're going to prepare the soil, is it going to be something like an oat, which has a fairly large seed, and that seed needs to be placed at least an inch, maybe an inch and a half into the soil? So how do we get that seed placed into that depth of soil? And typically we're talking about a prepared seed bed, or in the worst case scenario, we may have something that's not a prepared seed bed, but we could use some sort of a no-till drill or something like that to try to force that seed down through some sort of thatch layer or something that might be on the ground. But having said that, there's no substitute for a well-prepared seed bed. Well, where are you going to find the well-prepared seed bed opportunities in the hill country? It's going to be in the valleys. It's going to be in the valleys. It's not going to be on the hillside or on the hilltop. It's going to be in the valleys. And out there where we have a lot of limestone, clay particles or some impurities in limestone that have over eons washed down off the hills into the valleys. And so we have some fairly fertile valleys out there when you can find a wide spot between the hills. And so if you look at around, say, Gillespie County or Blanco County, some of those areas out there, you've got some really nice fertile fields. Now, they weren't that way naturally. The Germans that settled out there, hardworking people, they went around, picked up every dang rock in the field and made fences out of it.
I was
And
gonna say, I think they missed a couple, just a
they
couple.
missed.
I think they missed a couple.
But where you've got an open place there, you can usually prepare that seed bed, and there's a lot of things that go into that. But then we have to think about, is it a small seeded something or other? Are we planning on maybe putting some sort of a small seeded legume or something out there that we hope will grow? Well, you don't want to plant a seed over 8 times its diameter in the soil. So when you think about that, so an oat seed, that's where we get that inch, inch and a half. If we have something smaller, and I don't know a lot of clover seed that would grow out there, but there's people that try to grow some things out there. So the medics can do okay. And when you think about the size of that seed, it's just very, very tiny. And so we say 8 times nothing is nothing. So small seeded things, we want to put them on the soil surface, but the seed has to get in contact with the soil surface. Otherwise it will not germinate. So then that takes us back to preparing a good seed bed. And that means we've got to get out there, and it's not going to be one trip across the field with a disc. It's going to be multiple trips, especially on those clay soils, because clay has to be the right soil moisture content in order for you to work that very well. If it's too dry, it's like concrete. If it's too wet, we call it gumbo. It comes up in big hunks, and, so it has to be just right. Now, let's say that you're up in Mason County or Llano County, and some of those granitic soils up there, that's a totally different deal. That's a sand. And so much easier seedbed prep on something like that. So when we're thinking about preparing the soil, we have to think first about what is it we're going to try to plant. Now let's reverse that a little bit and think about a warm season. Are we going to think about some sort of warm season annual, or maybe a warm season perennial like Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, which is grown out there in the region? So once we get below about 24, 26 inch annual precip, we start run out of Bermuda grass country, but where y'all are right there, there's a lot of Bermuda grass grown.
Mhm.
And so that's got to be a prepared seed bed, a very well prepared seed bed. And that means we don't want any perennial vegetation growing in that field because we want to reduce the competition for that new establishment so that it doesn't have to fight too much, something else that's already established and has a big perennial root system. We want to try to destroy all that before we make the seed bed. But so it depends really on what is it we're trying to accomplish and when do we start that? Again, cool season stuff, 6 to 8 weeks before the first historic frost. And then we can think about what things are adapted out there. A lot of people go and buy things or seed for things that they've read about. But if it hasn't been tested in your area, I wouldn't devote a lot of acreage to that. There's nothing wrong with trying something new,
Mhm.
but don't plant 100 acres of it if it hasn't been tested in your area. For example, in Uvalde, I mean, if some of the if Eugen Dong hasn't gone around and tried some of those things in that region and had success with it, then I would be a little bit skeptical about, planting something I'd read about. A lot of stuff we read about in the trade journals may do very well in Pennsylvania, but not do well at all in Texas Hill Country. And so, it just depends. Is it adapted or not? And if it is, okay, that's a different story. But if it's something new, we want to be a little bit careful with that.
So where would be a good place for people to figure out what has been tested in the area, or, some other possibilities or things that, you can try, but you may not be necessarily successful with it?
So, of course, and I mentioned Uvalde Center.
Hmm.
So we have regional centers throughout the state. We have 13 of them. And so those are good places to go and think about what's been tried in the region. Now, in your region, you only have Uvalde, and Uvalde is kind of sitting on the southern edge of the hill country.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't, a lot of things that they do there do not relate necessarily to the hill
Yes.
country. In that case, then I would go to your local county extension agent and I would ask them if they have heard of this, have any experience with it, know any producers that have any experience. Another good source of information would be the NRCS personnel in that region, because a lot of times they're actually paying or providing financial assistance for establishment of things. And a lot of times they have sort of a good understanding of what might work or what might not work. And then finally, I think your Texas Parks and Wildlife biologists also can have a good understanding about what works and what doesn't, especially when it comes to native plants, because that's kind of their universe. And you can say, well, I was planning on, putting whatever. Let's pick one, partridge pea. I was going to put partridge pea out here and see if I could attract some doves or whatever. And they might say, well, we haven't had any partridge pea grow here. It grows better a little east of here, a little north of here, or whatever they might say.
Mhm.
But they can also give you some good insight. And so that's three sources that are local that can give you some good input. A final fourth source would be, I would say, a long term neighbor. So a
Mm.
long-term neighbor that has been there, been in that county, been on that property for, we'll say, many, many years. They could be generational on that property. And when you go and ask them, many times those neighbors are more than happy to share with you information about their experiences about this or that. They won't necessarily tell you how much money they got in the bank,
Yeah.
but but they are very likely to share with you some important things about what grows well here in this part of the state. NRCS, back to them, they can go to that web soil survey
Yes.
and look on the web soil survey, which to me is not user friendly. I'd rather have the old printed version myself. But you can go in there with their help and find out on the ecological site description. And you can look at your property and see, here's the plants that would have been here had we not come along and fouled all this up with our plows and disc and, all these kinds of things. And they can tell you in the case of native plants, this is what should grow on your site. And so that can be a very valuable source of information if you're thinking about establishing a native plant.
So, and I guess the best part about all of those resources is they're free.
They
Is
are
is
free.
is yeah, y'all are already technically paying for it, but you don't get an option to pay for it. So that's why it's free.
It's part of your taxes, whether
It's
it's
part of
state,
your taxes.
local, federal, whatever it is, you've already paid for it. So,
So take advantage.
yeah, that's right.
Take full advantage. Okay, so you'd mentioned that for cool season, 6 to 8 weeks. Is there a planting, I'll say, timeline for your warm season plants? Or is that one of those where it's like, would it be maybe after the last freeze of the year is when you could plant?
Okay, so this is where I get in a little bit of conflict with other colleagues. If you ask any agronomist across the United States about when's the best time to plant a warm season or whatever, they're going to say after the last historical frost date
Mhm.
in your location. Having said that, I ask the question and I say, when does Mother Nature plant her warm season stuff? We'll talk about native stuff. And they'll scratch their heads a little bit. They'll say, well, I guess late summer, early autumn. I said, yeah. And who am I to argue with Mother Nature? And so
Fair.
when we're thinking about establishing things like native grasses, and I will say that even Tifton 85 here in Brazos County, I've had the best luck establishing during that late summer, early autumn time frame. If you talk to the people with Texas native seeds, especially down in South Texas, they don't plant anything until the fall. They think that their rainfall is much more consistent in the fall, where our spring rains have been anything but consistent over the last several years. And the thing I like about it is you have less weed problem when you plant in the fall or late summer. And so I guess I would say the jury is still out on that one, because most of my colleagues would say, in the spring. Um, but I think we need to kind of take a look around us at the natural world and see how that functions. And to me, it looks like native warm season grasses are established in late summer, early autumn.
That's a very valid point. I had never thought about that before.
Now,
But yeah,
if we're
Is
talking
there,
about warm season annuals, that's a different story.
different
We'll
story.
wait till after the last frost and then we'll plant. Right. But some of these perennials seem to do better if we put them in there a little bit later in the season. Carly, did you have a question?
yeah, and I don't know how to ask it, so I hope I make sense, but is there anything to, if the way that we plant it, like Mother Nature is just gonna sprinkle it on the ground, but and I don't know, maybe not. I mean, if it's, in a cattle pasture, the cattle are stomping it down, but is it something that we're doing differently that's why we plant it a different time of year?
No, I think
Not
that's
necessarily.
really historical, and it's sort of inertia. I mean, when you think about people in the past, they would wait till after winter, and it's time to plant corn. Okay, so that's an annual. Or it's time to plant, whatever it was. Those were usually annual crops that they were planting, not necessarily Bermuda grass or some sort of perennial or even a native. The thing with native grasses, those seeds are fairly small. And so putting them out on the soil surface is perfect. That's the way
Yeah.
Mother Nature intended for that to be done. But and the cattle being in there trampling around, I don't really want my cattle in a new establishment. I want that to
That's
be
fair.
able, yeah, get up and get going and have a good root system develop before I turn the cattle back in there. And so anytime I've got a new establishment going on, I'm going to keep the cattle out of there until those plants are actually ready to be grazed.
Makes
But good,
sense.
good question.
So, and one thing that you had kind of touched on is you had said the last frost, and then I kept saying the last freeze. Is there, and maybe I don't know if you can answer this, is there a difference between a frost and a freeze? Or is that just like a terminology thing?
I think I'm using those interchangeably, like,
Okay.
synonyms, I guess.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you get out there and you have some of this, what they call a hoarfrost, which it didn't really get below freezing, but you got a
Mhm.
little frost on the leaves or something like that. So yeah, I would say after that last, what we could consider a damaging freeze temperature below freezing, because I don't want to have something planted before that and then get up and then have a freeze and, kill that plant, because those annuals, once you kill that annual when it's a short plant, it doesn't have enough energy left in that seed to push back up and get some new leaves. So we want to protect those at all costs.
Okay. Um, so we talked about like, I'll say like deciding what you want to do, because definitely you're right. That is like 100% like you need to figure out what your plan is before you just start going at it willy-nilly. But okay, so you've decided what you're going to plant, and you'd kind of mentioned a little bit about like disking. Are there any other or how do you then like you've decided what you're going to plant? How do you prep that area? Like I'm trying to think how to ask it, and maybe you kind of know the direction I'm going with this, and if not, that's fine because my brain is malfunctioning at the time being. But so like disking, obviously, I'm guessing like an herbicide could potentially be an option to prep it depending upon what plants are there currently.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We've got to destroy all the perennial vegetation in that field if we're going to try to establish something differently in that field. And so, yes, sometimes it takes a lot of herbicide. And, you know, there's people that are excited about glyphosate, but I'm going to say that's probably the product of choice if you want to go in and you've got grass and broadleaves and all of that. Now, if it's just a broadleaf patch, then we've got other options that we could use to go in there, some broadleaf herbicides. But typically, if we're trying to establish something new, and I'll pick on Tipton 85 again, if we're going to pick on that and we're going to establish that, we need to kill everything out of that field before we think about trying to go back in. It's not a cheap establishment. I mean, it's going to be north of $400 an acre. And that's actually the first question I ask when people say they want to plant something new. I say, tell me the economic justification for why you want to do this. Do you have a good economical reason to do this? If not, if it's just for fun, okay, if you got the money to do that, that's fine. A
Right.
lot of people have that kind of money, right? Uh, but if it's somebody that's actually trying to, if it's really a business for those people, then let's talk about the economics of that. A lot of times I get people that want to plant Tifton 85 and tear out their coastal field that's been there for 30 years. Well, what advantage would there be there? Okay, I would gain drought tolerance, and that can be reason enough in some places to go with Tifton 85. Animal performance. If I am weaning and stockering my own calves, okay, then I can put more weight on them during the summer with Tipton 85 than anything else that I can think of. So there's some economic justification. But if I'm just, I've got a commercial cow herd and I'm selling my calves at weaning down at the sale barn, I don't need that extra nutrition, then maybe I can think about saving that $400 an acre and maybe putting that into some other infrastructure improvement or something on the place. But but if I've decided I'm going to do this, I'm going to tear out my coastal field and put Tifton 85 in there. All right, so the first thing I'm going to have to do is destroy what's there. Now, we'll think about, all right, when's the best time to apply that herbicide? The herbicide, I think, is best applied in late summer, early autumn, because perennial plants tend to start pushing down carbohydrate flow down into the crown to store for winter and go through the winter with that little bit of carbohydrate store. And then when the spring comes, they use that little bit to push a few green leaves up. And then they start photosynthesizing and they start, making their own leaves. But if I'm pushing down in late summer, early autumn, to me, that's the time to apply the herbicide so I can actually push the product down to the crown and root system and get a better kill. You can try it in the spring. I don't think you'll get as good a kill. So I withhold that until, but all this means that I'm planning a year in advance, right?
Mhm.
I'm not waking up in the spring and saying, hey, I'm going to plant Bermuda grass field this spring. No, I'm thinking about that starting last year by killing the grass and starting the seedbed prep, because I know it's going to take more than one trip. So I've got all fall and winter to go through that. And then if I want to plant in the spring, then I've got a great seed bed. Everything is just right. I've located my sprigs. I got the equipment, or I found somebody to do it for me. Gives me a lot more opportunity to get my ducks in a row, because a lot of people think that that window of opportunity for planting in the spring opens wide and stays open for a long time. It can open and close in a heartbeat. And I mean, like this year or last year, I mean, we've had lots of rain, and
Mhm.
people that thought, oh, I'm going to get out there and plant. No, you didn't get a chance to do that. So if we'd started a year earlier, we could have gotten in there right after a rain, planted, and caught another rain and been off to a good start. But we've got to destroy the vegetation. Then we've got to work that seed bed up. We've got to already have identified what we're going to plant, why we're going to plant it. We're going to have a justification for that. Identify the seed or the sprigs that we're going to plant. Identify the equipment that I'm going to need, or find the person I'm going to use to do that work for me, because a lot of times it takes specialized equipment a lot of people don't have. And then there's people that are in that business that have all that equipment, and they can come and you say, oh, he's going to charge me how much per acre? Oh, well, think about how much it costs you to have that same equipment that he has, and
Mhm.
only use it once or twice in your lifetime. And
And
so,
then and then
go
use
ahead.
the equipment wrong and have to replant again.
Right. Because I didn't understand how to use it.
Mhm.
Exactly. And so all of these things should be on the checklist that you start the year prior. But
Mhm.
once you actually get into doing that, yeah, vegetation destruction is going to be first, and seedbed prep is going to be second.
And so, and I think this is one of those things that I feel like a lot of people, and maybe it's just the time that we live in, everything's so easily accessible at your fingertips, versus, even just 100 years ago wasn't quite as easy to get seeds or anything. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, people want to wait till the spring because they're like, that you just get that, like, you're like, oh, spring, like it's ready, it's time. But it's like, in reality, no, you do need to prep everything in the fall,
Right.
before you start planting everything. So what about applying, because you're gonna have, probably, depending upon your situation, especially if you're in like a native range type scenario, you do have your warm season, but you also have your cool season plants. When should you apply, if you need to apply, or like herbicide, or treat some of those cool season plants, to prep your seed bed further for that, you know, for when the spring green up happens? When should you be doing that?
So can I introduce a little philosophical bias I have?
Absolutely.
I never destroy a rangeland community to put an introduced plant on it.
Good.
Never. That just goes against my religion, against my training. I mean, it's just, and so when we talk about, oh, that nasty cool season, like Texas winter grass, oh, that nasty plant, that's a valuable grazing plant for
Very true.
lots and lots of critters. And so I don't use herbicides on rangelands. I mean, we'll use herbicides on brush species, right?
Mhm.
Trying to control the canopy so that we can have more of the, whatever it's grass or forb community that comes along underneath that. But I just don't, so I wouldn't even be going there in the first place. Now, if it's something else, it's an introduced thing and I want to change that or whatever, yeah, I'm bringing out the spray rig, or I'm hiring somebody to come out with a spray rig, and I'm just gonna, indiscriminately kill everything in the
Mhm.
pasture, whether it's warm season, cool season. Now, if I start that let's say we started that last summer, let's
Mhm.
say the last 3 week or last 2 weeks of September. And I start working the seed bed throughout the season, and I start seeing some green things start popping up again. Could be those are annuals, and the next time I go through there with a disc, I'm going to be controlling those. But if they look to be a perennial plant, if there's something there that I identify as a perennial, and I say, "Ooh, I must have missed this one," and so I may make a second herbicide application sometime late winter, early spring before I get ready to plant. But anyway, I hated to hijack that away from you, but
No, no,
to
no.
me,
And
rangelands they're just sacred. I'm going to manage those, not destroy them.
I live in the same world as you do, but it's one of those things. I felt like the question had to be asked.
And
Um,
I'm glad you asked it.
and I guess also you've been mentioning like late summer, early fall. Like, what do you define as late summer? Because to me, like right now, this would be late summer for me, or this would be early fall. See, I'm okay. Yeah, I don't think, Dr. Raymond, I don't think I mentioned this. I'm a Pennsylvania girl.
Oh
So
my goodness.
a lot of our viewers know this. Or I've probably mentioned this a couple times to our viewers, but for me right now, this would be like early fall
It's
for
different up
me.
north, right?
It is
It's
different up north.
Yeah, it is different up north. So what I'm referring to is for me, and I know it changes now that we've got all these fancy instruments and everything. For me, the first day of fall is September 21st. It always was for me growing up, like March 21st is spring. And so when I say September 21st is the first day of autumn, late summer to me is kind of like that last week before that. You could
Okay.
even say 2 weeks prior to that, or maybe 2 weeks after that. Things are still growing,
Mhm.
but that to me is late summer, early autumn, and it
Okay.
all revolves around that first day of autumn.
Okay. And then you said for you, like sort of spring is like March
March 21,
21.
June 21,
Okay.
December 21.
The
I mean,
21st is
they were
a really
always
important
that
day.
way going up. And nowadays it's the 20th or the 22nd at 2:02 p.m. I mean, they've gotten it so precise now, but for me, it's still those 21st days. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm still trying to adjust. Sometimes I'm like, it's August. It still is triple digits out here.
we have
It's
hot
peak
and
peak
hotter
summer right
too.
now.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty well. You have, where was it? Somewhere I said they cracked a joke about you have construction season and then
uh,
you have summer or something like that. I forget. Maybe I'm
the
getting that mixed up with
weatherman, the
them.
weatherman in San Antonio, Chris Sushan, he's got the 12 seasons of Texas, and it's pretty interesting to look at.
I have to look that up.
I don't think, so we normally watch him, and I don't think I've ever heard him talk about the 12 seasons. I'm gonna have to look it up when we hop off here and
Yeah,
see
if
what
you can find that. He
his
mentions
12
that on
seasons.
Facebook pretty often. But for me, there's two seasons, hot and hotter.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we don't have a fall, we don't have a spring. I mean,
No.
it just in winter only occasionally.
Yep. Yep. As Carly and I like to joke, we get to wear sweaters like 2 days
Right?
out of the whole year. You get 2 days to wear your sweaters. So pick those two
Exactly.
favorite sweaters.
Exactly. Were you here for the Snowmageddon, they called it back in 21?
I was,
Okay.
yes. I
That
was
was
here
that
Snowmageddon.
was the real winter for us. We don't get that very often, but
And I had not had a winter like that in a while. I think I moved to Texas in 2014. So
okay.
I've been here for a while, but yeah, that was, other than the fact that we lost power at where we were at,
Yeah.
it was great for me. I loved it.
Me too.
I
We
loved
stayed
it.
outside. We were like playing and
Um,
Anyway,
yeah.
anyway,
As Dr. Redmond, if you haven't guessed, we get off on all sorts of tangents on this
I love chasing rabbits.
show. It's the best. It's the absolute best.
It is.
Um, okay, so um, so I guess getting back to it. Okay, so talked about sort of prepping things. I'll say putting the season. What are some good? I mean, how do you go about selecting like a seed company? Because I know we cannot promote any one seed company out there, but as always with everything, there are some companies that are a little bit better than others. How do you go about making sure that the seed you are getting is, I'll say, good quality seed? You're not gonna, the chances of of seeds that you don't want being mixed in are slim to none, we'll say.
And so where people buy their seed typically is going to be down at the farm chemical fertilizer seeds, that's where they're typically going to get. And so they'll have different seed companies represented in there when you go to look. So the best way to tell is look at the seed tag. We have seed tag law in Texas. And when you look at the seed tag, it's going to give you some very, very important information. What we're interested in is what we call the PLS, pure life seed. And so when you look on that tag, it will tell you the purity. I've seen some ryegrass seed lots, and you look on the tag, and it's 100%. There ain't nothing in that bag but ryegrass seed, and they know that. They guarantee that. And if it's found to not be that, then they're in trouble with the state agency. You also want to look for the live part of it, the germination rate. And so when you look at the germination rate, let's say that you're 100% pure and they say it's 100% germ rate. All right, so what I have is 100% pure live seed. If you have something like, say the germ rate on it is 60%, okay, then 100 times 60 is going to be 60%. And so if I've told somebody that you need to plant 20 pounds of this, but the PLS on that is only 60%, then I have to take the 20 and divide it by 0.6 to actually increase my seeding rate. I'm not sure what the number would be on that, but let's say that it went up to 30 pounds or something. In order to get 20 pounds of pure live seed, I'm gonna have to plant a higher rate of that. Now let's say we contrast that with another lot of seed over here, a different company, and it's 100% pure, and they have 90% germination. Oh, wow, this is a much better deal because I don't have to apply near as much more to get to what I want as far as 20% or 20 pounds of pure live seed. The other important thing on that seed tag is going to be things like the weed percentage. So if let's say we're buying some native grass seed, okay, so the purity is going to be low. That's just the way it is. The germ rate's going to be low, probably. And then you're going to look at the weed seed, and you're going to see something like maybe it's 30% weed seed in there. Well, contrast that with maybe another source that maybe has less weeds in it, because you don't want to introduce a bunch of weeds into your pasture there if you don't have to. So the seed tag is the best way to determine what is it I'm getting. And then of course you can do the math. If one of them is twice as much, for a 50-pound sack, well, okay, I can probably live with this lower quality here. I'll just up the seeding rate on it. But seed tag is your friend.
Okay. I didn't realize you were going to have to do some math this morning.
Oh, and I'm always math challenged. So
Same. I give presentations and I'll do examples, and then I'm like, why did I pick really hard numbers to do the math on? I should have picked really easy numbers.
I like to do things I call Aggie math that are really, really easy, so that I can do that in my head. So anyway.
Yep. I feel that. Go ahead, Carly.
I get the question a lot of what seed mix should I get? And are those kind of the sorry, my headphones are messing up. I'm assuming the seed company's pretty, like, once you do pick one, they pretty much can sell you something, of course, but how do you know you're getting the right mix, or I don't know.
Well, so if we're talking about let's say a native grass mix or a native grass forb mix, the best way, and I don't like mixes. I like to make my own mixes.
Noted.
And I like to look at the ecological site description. And if it says, 60% would be little blue stem and 30% would be this and that. And I like to do my own mix, when we trying to formulate those. But having said that, there are some companies, trying to think, there are a few companies in the state. So Doug King over there out of San Antonio is one. Our Pogue Agri Partners still in business down in Kennedy, Texas. Gary died a few years ago. And I think his son or son-in-law took it over. I'm not sure if they're still.
I'll see while you're talking. I'll see if I can look it up and see it.
POGUE Agri Partners in Kennedy. And then you've got Bammert up in Muleshoe. And I think Bammert does a really, really good job, as do the Turner, as Turner Company. There's, it started out with the dad and then the son, and now it's down to the grandkids that are running that. And they are.
I was gonna say, it does look like Pogue is still, they have a website. It looks like it's fairly up to date. They have some business hours. So it looks like they're still functioning.
For your country and South, and Douglas King out of San Antonio, that would probably be where I would go for seed and seed mixtures. And they'll bag some up. Turner does this a lot. They actually call them things like hardland mixture, sandy land mixture, wildlife mixture, those kinds of things. Sometimes I wonder about, am I really getting my money's worth out of that? That's why I prefer to do my own mix, but
you're just getting nerdy with it because you're an agronomist. So
well, I want to make sure that I'm getting what I'm getting.
Right.
And you can trust Turner and Bammert. Those guys have been in the business a long time. They have great reputations, as does Douglas King and Pogue down in Kennedy. So there's places in the state that you can get seed and get a mix. If they're selling a mix, you can depend on them that they're going to have in the bag what they say is in the bag. So that's the best way to do it, is buy from somebody that's reputable or do your own.
And okay, so you're ready to plant, like you've got your seed, your soil's prepped. So, and you'd mentioned that like the planting season, like when you should plant, but how do you decide during those couple of months when to put that seed in the soil?
Okay. So one of the things I like to look at is the rainfall. And, if it's been raining and you look at the long range forecast and it looks like there's a good chance that we're going to have some rainfall, I'll go ahead and I'll get in that season and I'll go ahead and get the seed in the ground. If perchance, like in 2011, it hasn't rained for 6 months and the forecast is it's not going to rain for another 6 months, I'm going to save my money. If I'm the type of person that goes to Las Vegas with $1,000 and comes back with 20,000, I'll probably go ahead and put that seed out regardless, But I think most people are better served to look at the long range forecast, because these climatologists, they're different than weather people, right? Weather people, that's their job is short range, short term. The climatologists, though, are looking at things that the weather people don't necessarily look at day to day. And they've got a pretty good track record of looking out several weeks or several months and telling you, looks like a pretty good chance of rain the next few weeks or whatever. So that's what I'm banking on. And if it just looks disastrous, I'm just going to not do anything. I'm just going to, I'll feed hay or sell cows or do something, But I'm going to wait until I have a better chance of success with that, because whatever you're planting, it's never inexpensive.
Right.
I mean, just to go down and buy a bag of oat, to put on an acre of ground, that's still going to cost you quite a bit of money to prepare that acre, put the seed in the ground, fertilize it like you ought to. So just wait till the conditions look better.
And so basically like what? Like if it's forecasted to, rain, we'll say, next Tuesday, sometime later this week, you can
get it in the ground.
Get it in the ground. And then if it doesn't rain, you just hope that you get some rainfall, but it's probably, those seeds will probably be okay as long as you get some rain within the next month or so. I
As
guess.
long as the birds and the ants don't take all the seed off, you'll be in great shape. But
Yep, because they got to eat too. They're
they
they're
got to
looking
eat
for an
too.
they're
That's
looking for
right.
an easy meal. Easy
That's
meal.
right. So, but again, we want to be within the season. And so we wouldn't be thinking about planting cool season stuff right now. We would be within that 6 to 8 weeks, before the first frost day.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think I think we've covered quite a bit. I realize we could probably, spend more time, but Dr. Redmond, is there anything else any other questions that we have not asked or anything else that you want to sort of throw out there for everyone before we wrap up here?
I will throw out something for the deer hunters.
Mm.
A lot of times, first of all, deer hunters typically are very poor farmers. And a lot of times they do not get a crop. Let's say that oak patch, they don't get that because they didn't do an adequate job of seedbed prep and the planting, the timing on that. And then the fertility. We've got to think about that. A lot of times people will tell me that, oh, we're planting that. We're trying to help the deer, with their nutrition during the winter when there's nothing there. But when the oak crop needs a top dressing in January, we seldom go back to the deer lease and top dress our oak crop because that's when the deer truly do need that nutrition, especially the bucks, because they've run off a bunch of their body weight chasing does around. But we're at home watching football and staying warm and all that. So if we're really going to plant stuff to try to help the deer, we need to plant it and fertilize it the way it should be. Think about weed management. If if you've got too many weeds in there, that sort of negates the whole aspect of planting. Now, if we're just planting something as a bait, so we can just shoot things out there, that's different.
That's different.
When you leave and go home, forget about it because you're going to plant it again next year, So, but I would like to see the deer hunters do a little bit better job on their seedbed prep. Now, if they're leasing from a farmer and they can pay him to do it, well done, because he knows how to do it and he'll get it done right.
Yep, he's done it once or twice. He knows how to get it done. Yep. So,
Right.
and when you say top dress, what do you mean by that?
Okay, top dress. We're going to come in when we're preparing that seedbed. We're going to plant and introduce forage of any type. We're going to get a soil test, and we're going to look and see what the soil test looks like. Nitrogen is a given. We got to put nitrogen on it regardless. But things like phosphorus and potassium and maybe sometimes some micronutrients, we want to find out, what do I need, or do I have adequate? And which is nice out in the hill country on those clay soils, they're usually higher in inherent fertility. But nitrogen is a mobile element. It doesn't hang around. It goes somewhere. So you can't really, put out some and say, oh, well, we got plenty from last year. No, it's usually not there. And so we want to go out there and put out what we need at the beginning of the season when the crop is coming up. And then we like to go in and fertilize those small grains again in late, sometime after Christmas, getting into January, mid-January, something like that. And we'll call that a top dress. So we're just going to go out, if it's phosphorus and potassium, we can incorporate that in the seed bed while we're working that up, get that into the root zone. But the nitrogen, we can just put that right on top, and that benefits that plant, and it'll grow then into the spring and provide a lot of forage. And if it's cattle, that's important. You want that forage, but if it's deer, if you're really trying to help the deer, it's important for them as well. So
Just making sure the plants get their vitamins so they can grow nice and healthy and strong for you.
Exactly right. Because I don't care what your genetics are, if you're not fed properly, you're not going to do very well.
Yep. So. All right.
Right.
Carla, you got anything else?
No, that covered, I was gonna say that covered my expectations, but I guess that sounded kind of rude. But yeah, I had like a couple of really specific questions. I'm like, let's stretch that out. So covered everything and more. So thank you.
Carly knows me too well. She knows she can insult me and get away
No.
with it. Oh,
Gosh. All right. Well, Dr. Redmond, thank you so much for taking the
I've
time to
enjoyed
join
it.
us today.
I've enjoyed it anytime.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank
you.
you so much. So we hope y'all have an absolutely fantastic Tuesday, and we will see y'all next Tuesday. Yes, and we're gonna talk about understanding hay a little bit. And I know nothing about hay other than that livestock eat it. This is about the
Yep.
extent of my knowledge. So we're gonna learn a lot next week about hay.
Well, there's a way to do it right, and then there's other ways.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
all
But
right.
all
Well,
right,
y'all have a
everyone.
great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Y'all
you.
too. Bye.